Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Liz Peterson. She is a seer, intuitive energy healer, Reiki Master, and host of her podcast, Raising the Vibe with Liz. She's also the author of Mom Died Last Night, My Shared Death Experience. Today, we will be talking about how life doesn't end after we die and how we have the ability to communicate with those that we lost from across the veil. Liz, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Johnny. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And that's a pretty big topic we're going to cover tonight. So, how does someone find themselves communicating with those across the veil? I mean, did it start with an experience when you were younger, or how did that begin?
Yes, it started for me very young. I remember when I was little being able to get a sense of the feeling of the room or know when someone was upset or know that spirit was in the room. I remember an instance when I was very young. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was sleeping upstairs with my oldest sister. And, there's two twin beds, a window in between. And I wake up, as I usually did in the middle of the night, and I look over and there's a white woman sitting by her pillow looking out the window and the moonlight is shining on her. And she turns to me and puts her finger up to her mouth and says, shh, to me, and then continues to look out the window. I had another experience a little bit older where I woke up and there was a dark shadow figure standing next to my bed. That was really unpleasant and scared me. So I did turn that visual aspect of my gifts off for quite some time, but I could still feel them. I could still sense that they were in the room. And that continued on. I just took that visual aspect out of it until I hit my 20s, 30s.
Okay. You took the visual aspect out of it at one point. Was that a conscious decision to tell yourself or your higher self or whatever that may be, I do not want to see these things?
I was very young, so I'm not exactly sure if it was conscious. It was out of fear. My fear turned that off for me. And from hearing other stories from other people who were children who experienced those things, after they experienced that fear, it did turn off for them as well. And so, no, I don't think it was conscious. I think it was just out of fear, being young and not wanting to. And as I'm older now, when I don't want to be bothered by spirit, it isn't asked, sending boundaries with spirit on the other side. No, don't wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. No, the office is closed. I don't want to communicate with anybody right now. And they don't bother me. So a basic clear, like no, like you would with a human being here in this realm, setting boundaries really sets the stage for you and your experience with spirit.
Okay. Pretty common amongst intuitives where they have these types of experiences when they're younger, seeing spirits, feeling them, and so forth. So it doesn't really surprise me. Now, you also describe yourself as a seer. Now, isn't a seer the same thing as a psychic, or are there differences?
I feel that it's pretty much the same thing. A seer is very visual, as it would suggest that you see things. That's clairvoyance. So I do see things. I see outward things occasionally. Most of the time, I see within my own mind. I do a little thing where I kind of disconnect from, seeing visually, kind of let my vision go blurry and allow that natural daydreaming aspect, I guess you could say, step in. And I get visual images in that way, like a daydream.
Okay, so you mentioned clairvoyance, right? Which is also associated often with mediums. So you don't really consider yourself a medium, do you?
I don't really consider myself a practicing medium right now. Can I do mediumship? Yes. Mediumship is communication with spirits who have crossed over into the other dimension. Am I able to sense that a loved one is in the room? Am I able to sense that my mother is with me? Yes. I had one situation back in 2017 where I was helping with a workshop, and they were using an old house in Seattle. And we went upstairs and I go, oh, there's a woman sitting in the chair in the window by the sewing machine. I'm not sure if she's connected to the house, the chair, or the sewing machine, but I know that she's there. And then another woman, shows up for the workshop, and she comes from using the restroom upstairs, and she goes, oh, there's a woman sitting, up in the chair upstairs. So I got a little validation with that. So that's how it shows up for me. I get very little messages, the usual. They just want us to know that, they still love us on the other side, that they've let go of grievances, that were maybe held on this side, that, most of the time that they're still with you over on the other side, helping you, maybe being a guide or your little personal angel over on the other side. And, that does continue. So it's mainly messages like that, hey, I'm still around. I love you. Did you see that bird the other day that I sent you? Just little things like that. But I'm not a practicing medium where I'm up on stage and actually, pulling in people for people in an audience situation as of yet.
A good point, because as I've been told several times, those that can communicate with the dead are considered mediums. And often the distinction between a psychic and a medium is a psychic can read energy, and a medium can usually do the same thing, but a medium can also contact the dead, communicate with the dead, which a psychic cannot do necessarily. So it seems to me that all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. Would you agree?
Exactly. Well spoken. Just like James Van Prague says. Yes. All mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums.
Seems to be the consensus. You communicate with people that have passed on. What can you tell us about their demeanor other than I'm still here, I love you, I'm here to help, did you see the white butterfly that I showed you the other day, and things like that? Do you think maybe they carry a lot of their stuff with them, or not necessarily once they cross the veil?
My experience has been that across the veil is love. So they're holding a space of love. There's also different aspects I've heard across the veil where they're in study, where we're here in this realm doing our work, and learning from our experiences. That continues on after death. They can choose to hang out for a while. They can choose to do some work on the other side, or they can choose to reincarnate again and come back here and have this experience here. It's very much a sense of love. There's a lot of forgiveness over on the other side. There's not that emotional attachment to things that happened in this life anymore, where we have an emotional charge around some specific things that may have happened between ourselves and our loved ones here in the physical plane. They don't have that because there's not that emotional attachment. I've heard many stories where people have near death experiences. It lacks that attachment to emotion over on the other side. There's a sense of I could have done better, but there's not, beating themselves up or feeling bad about what happened or anything like that. It's this pure, I'm going to just say like a pure forgiveness around the whole situation where, that aspect just doesn't exist.
You made a comment earlier that when someone goes across the veil, when they die, they keep studying, they keep working on things, and they have a choice to reincarnate or not. So why would they not choose to come back?
That is the question for the ages, isn't it? We all want to know, like, what happens on the other side? Is it the same as here? Does it look different? Are we in the light? A lot of people experience a lot of different things. I personally, in my near death experience when I was younger, only had a little conversation with my grandmother where she said, it's not my time yet and go back. There was no white light or anything like that. When I had my out of body experience in a car accident when I was 21 years old, it was just kind of a looking from above and then, waking up when they were moving me in the car and then waking up in the hospital again. I only know from stories that I've heard from near death experiencers personally. So I don't feel really educated enough to answer that question.
But you did have a near death experience. How does that experience figure into your path that you're on currently?
It reminds me that I'm here for a reason, that I chose to come here with purpose. being a seer, I know that I planned my life before I came down here. I can visually see myself sitting at a table with people, like discussing what my life was going to be like. Do I know what is coming up? No, I do not. Do I have what I call dream vus where, and a lot of people experience these where like, oh, I feel like I've dreamt this before, or I've experienced this before at certain occasions. And I call those my life point moments where it's kind of, oh, I'm exactly on the path that I'm supposed to be on right now, type of moment. Other than that, I think having that experience gave me a little extra boost into knowing that, we're more than just this physical body, that we do continue over on the other side, that we can communicate with our loved ones on the other side, whether that be asking for a sign or having a dream visitation, from our loved ones, like I have experienced from my mother. I write about it in my book. And it's just those little kind of inklings that I've had over the years that show me that there is a spirit realm, that our energy does continue after we pass on.
In your experience, you've noticed that these souls that you've come in contact with, they do keep studying, but you didn't really get a clear idea of why they choose to come back or why they choose to stay in that realm, which I think is a complicated question, but it's one that I've never gotten an answer on. Not yet, anyway.
I've heard from some spiritual teachers that it's the soul's journey to learn, to keep evolving. So that might be a reason why not only do we see this as a learning planet, but over on the other side, they would see continued education as an evolution of the soul. And supposedly, I've heard we're multidimensional. We can be in more places than once. Like they speak, the angels can be helping more than one person on the planet, right? But our soul can go off in different areas. Like my mother's incarnated already, yet I can call on her and have her energy here with me. I think we're these multidimensional, multifaceted souls. And I honestly think the more I think about oneness and my own spiritual experiences and my awakening experiences, although I don't think there is an awakening moment, we continue to awaken as we age, as we go beyond. It's way more than our brains could probably even grasp over on the other side.
It's not the first time I've heard that. Now, you brought up something really, really interesting. Your mother, she passed, you had some contact with her, and you say she is incarnated again. Is that correct?
Yes, I was doing a meditative process at a workshop, and I discussed this in my book as well at the end. And I was laying there, blissed out, having an experience, and had a vision of her reincarnating back into the family again. I very much do think that she is reincarnated back onto the planet. Her signs happen a little bit less now, and it's more of invoking her or saying her name, inviting her, hey, mom, are you still around? Can you give me a sign? This sort of thing. But there's also that aspect where when my sisters and I are together, we're having family occasions, we do get signs that she is here, that she is watching us. Just recently at a baby shower, I got a few signs, and one of the packages that she opened up had an elephant on the blanket that my sister had made. And that was one of the signs, that we received recently from a medium. And like, oh, elephant, wonder how that fits. It's not aligning right now, but maybe it will in the future. Then we show up at the baby shower and there's a blanket with an elephant on it. So little signs and symbols like that.
Very interesting, because I think what you're implying is that her soul is in the ether, or whatever that space we want is called, but she's also occupying a body here. Wouldn't it be really cool? And I'm sure this is against the rules, but wouldn't it be really cool if you can actually locate someone who passed on and then incarnated again? Or is that something that is verboten? It's like forbidden.
Wow, that would be fantastic. What a great question. And to sit and ponder that. I know children that are born who remember their past lives, and some of these children have even been able to meet the families that they came from, and they know things, that you can't find on the internet. So yes, to be able to do that, would be fantastic. What an amazing thing to have that consciousness and not be born with that veil, and be able to have, conscious experience here during this physical incarnation.
But that experience was not afforded to you, even though you were in meditation and you got a glimpse of your mom coming back into another body. It was not revealed, correct?
It was revealed. I do talk about it in my book, who she reincarnated to, and she very much loves this person or loved this person, while she was in her physical body. And even her name, her favorite cover color is blue, was blue. And her name meaning is blue in this new lifetime. So do they know? No.
In other words, you actually do know who she is. Maybe not know where she lives, but you know what her name is and that type of thing.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And wouldn't it be fun? I talk about this in my book, just like fantasizing about, and what if she is one of those children that does remember her past life and is able to reconnect with the family again? I think that would be amazing. And who knows? You never know in this lifetime, right? It always surprises me.
Let's talk about the shared death experience. I think we have to go back to the beginning of how that transpired, what you learned from it. And the question I had about these things is, first of all, what is a shared death experience, and is it related to a deathbed visitation?
I would say yes, it is related to a deathbed visitation. A shared death experience is a term coined by Raymond Moody, who I had the pleasure of interviewing on my podcast, Raise the Eye with Liz. And it's a participation in a person's death process, whether that be before they pass away, during death, or after death. That could be remotely sensing that a death has happened. When I was at my mother's bedside, I very much knew that my grandmother and my great grandmother were there, and they told me, we've got her. I was really hoping in the moment that it meant we've got her, we're going to help her heal. But in honesty, that meant we got her, we have her on the other side. She's safe and at peace. It can also be a feeling of accompanying your loved one to the other side. I heard a beautiful story that was shared where a woman was able to clairvoyantly see herself walking her husband over to the light and him passing over into the light and then waking up to that. It could be assisting during the death process, not only like her, but um, you know if you're able to communicate, talking with your loved one and letting them know that everything is okay here, that it's okay to go, that they can let go and, go over to the other side, into the light, as we like to say.
With your shared death experience with your mother, you were in the same room or you were in a different location? How did that work?
During my mother's death process, I was at her bedside in the hospital, was able to sit with her. A few hours after getting to the ER when they admitted her, I had gone home when they admitted her. They did intubate her, so she was not able to communicate, obviously, after that. But I was by her bedside the next day. I was able to sense that my grandmother and my great grandmother were there. I was able to feel like her soul was still present in the room, but not in her body. And then, unfortunately, my younger sister was able to get there by her bedside. In the middle of the night, the hospital allowed us to come, be by her bedside as her organs were failing. I walked in just a minute or two after she had taken her last breath. But my sister was there and was able to spend time with her by her bedside and was there when she passed, when she died.
Okay. Now you've had contact with her since then. So once after the passing, what are some examples of your connection with your mother?
My connection with my mother started almost immediately. I started getting mental visualizations that there's clairvoyant movies of my mother. She wasn't presenting herself as her age when she passed away. She was presenting herself a little bit younger with longer hair. She was beautiful. She was communicating how she would like her ashes taken care of by showing me an image of glass balloon ornaments that she had seen several months prior online. She came to me in dreams. I had several dream visitations of her. I had a sense that she was struggling a little bit in her death process after death. But then she showed me dreams that, everything had settled down and she was at peace. The next day, I was blessed with a sunny day. I'm sitting on my couch and kind of writing about my experience. And I saw a hummingbird shadow on the sun drenched door in front of me. I had just moved. I had no hummingbird feeders up. It was February. My mother loved hummingbirds. That was her sign to me that she was okay. I very much felt in that moment, okay, mom's on the other side. She's okay. Here's the sign I told her that I would be able to see when she passed on. Flickering lights. My printer to this day cycles every now and then when somebody says something that's important. Or at 3 o'clock in the morning, I used to have a water container in my last home and it would bubble up in the middle of the night when there's no cars going by or no one walking through the room to sort of jiggle it. So, just little signs here and there. And of course, the normal butterflies and cardinals and hummingbirds and dragonflies and her rose that my sister transplanted in her yard bloomed on her birthday, June 3rd. So we are having contact that she is still with us and, making an effort to let us know that she's still around.
And you've had the dream visitations as well, which I think are really interesting. So, how do we know? Because it's fairly common when we have visitations from someone that, we lost. How do we know it's not our imagination and it's actually really them?
I questioned this for years as I aged, and even being a seer and someone who can communicate on the other side, I still question. But every time someone passed away, whether I knew they had passed away or not, I would get a dream visitation. I remember a family friend of ours passed away, and I didn't know for 48 hours after having a dream that, he came in, he said hello, he shared a little message. I called my sister a couple days ago or a couple days later, and she says, "You do know that he's passed on, right?" So those situations. I had a roommate that I had back in Virginia come and visit me after he passed away, shared, came and said hi, shared a little message, and went along. My mother, I see her in dreams every now and then still.
When you see your mother, what is her demeanor like? Does she smile? Does she talk a lot? Because I've been told in my own experiences that sometimes they say nothing.
The two dreams that I had where her energy was very present in my dream, she was sitting there. She was just sitting in the dream, kind of observing what was going on. Recently, I had a dream where she was participating, but I really feel like that was more my subconscious mind playing out her as a role in my dream, as opposed to where she was just sitting and holding presence in a dream before. It felt really different.
With your experience with dream visitations and contact with the other side, has any of this experience given you any insight into our past lives?
Oh, I love past lives. I deal with past lives all the time. When I'm working with my clients during energy work sessions or psychic readings, they often come up. I think that we continue to work on our soul lessons from one lifetime to the next. Sometimes during these lifetimes, I have found working on clients and my own experiences that life events, say in my incarnation right now, might trigger emotions or experiences that I may have had in a past lifetime. So, like Ainsley McLeod says, who I had the pleasure of interviewing, actually lives on the same island as me here in the Puget Sound and is a friend of mine, says that, sometimes when we're born with those irrational fears, those come from past lifetimes as well. And we are very much, kind of working with our soul's knowledge, and our soul's knowledge comes forward with us. You hear old soul, new soul. A new soul is maybe someone who's possibly not as conscious, hasn't had a lot of experience, doesn't have a lot of compassion in this life, maybe. An old soul has had a lot of experience in past lifetimes, has that compassion that they can bring forward into this lifetime to be a little bit more understanding, have a little bit more of a broad, open spectrum viewpoint of the world, and not be so black and white in this lifetime.
Okay. So the energy work that you do does basically bring up past lives in some of your clients. So when this happens, are you actually able to see them visually, what their lives are, or do you just kind of guide them through the experience?
When I'm working energetically with someone and I have my hands on them, or sometimes even when I don't, if I'm just doing a psychic reading, let's see, I can give an example. So I had a client come and he had had surgery when he was a teenager. And when I'm working on his leg, I can see where in a past lifetime he had been in a war. He had had the lower part of his leg damaged and had it amputated. And I could see him standing there with his crutch. I could see that his army pant leg had been pinned up behind on the back. See him in his little cap, and how that had mimicked itself in this lifetime where he was still carrying forward that injury. And I was able to energetically work on that, the energy of that injury in this lifetime, to try to heal not only the surgery and the injury, that happened when he was younger, but go back in time, because time is not linear, and work on that injury that he had in a past life that was replicating in this life. So what it does is it clears the energy from that past wound. So in this lifetime, you're healing the surgical scars and what you need to heal in this lifetime, instead of having that multi-layered healing that can happen sometimes energetically in our auras and chakras and physical bodies.
Now, the energy work is really important, and it seems to be a portal for many people into the intuitive world. Now, do you feel like once you started, doing Reiki and doing the energy healing, did that open up your intuitive senses and your sensibilities, or were they already developed?
It's funny that you should ask that question, because growing up, I was very quote unquote feeling like I was normal, even though I had these gifts. And my friends were always like, how did you know that? Or, etc. Right. And I would always go, oh, I'm normal. But then I would have a fantastical experience and be like, okay, maybe not. So I would go back and forth. In my early 20s, when I found massage school and then did polarity therapy and core shamanism, it really opened the door for me to look at my gifts a little deeper, to learn what those gifts were. Then in my late 20s, early 30s, I did my 4-year program where my instructor was given permission to teach Barbara Brennan's Hands of Light work. She was a psychotherapist, so we were doing shadow work and childhood wounding. I got my Reiki Master during that 4-year program. The combination of the two really helped me to open up to my gifts, to learn what psychic abilities were, to learn how I worked as an individual. And that learning continues on to this day. I think it's a continued learning, it's a continued opening. We continue to evolve until the day that we die. And I actually think that's where that expression, with age comes wisdom, because our intuitive abilities continue to open up. And it's just learning how to trust ourselves, learning how to see how we work, paying attention and having that awareness about ourselves, and what gifts we have and how they manifest in our daily life and help us, from whether that be at work or with family or with our kids or just daily life. They're gifts to be able to make our lives easier. And the more we're tapped into those gifts that we have, I believe the more easier, the more tools we have in our toolkit to be able to help us in our daily lives.
Have you discovered any past lives of your own, or is this just limited to your clients that you work with?
Great question again, Johnny. I appreciate that. I was gifted with a reading from Ainsley McLeod and was able to search into a past life that I had previous, that had a little bit of overlay into this life, when I experienced new food allergy that made me very sick. So, journeying through that new food allergy and having an irrational fear over that, I was really desiring to seek out what the possibilities were. So I turned to Ainsley McLeod, who was a past life psychic, and learned from him what that past life was and why that was overlaying in my experience in this life, having died from starvation and cold. But then I've also had experience where I am with a friend and I get a glimpse of a past life that we shared together. So I have had the experience of both, where I have had to reach out to somebody to actually seek out the knowledge, and where I get glimpses into a past life that I have shared with a new friend or an old friend or a partner in that way. So it comes both ways.
So, in other words, you have recognized people in this life from the lives that you had shared before.
Yes, that is correct. And it's very much a feeling of, oh, I've known you before.
Have you ever shared that with them, or do you have to be very selective because with certain people that might really kind of freak them out, as it were?
In the past, I was hesitant to share with people, but now that I have stepped fully into my authenticity and personal sovereignty, and I put myself out there and I took the fear out of what I do. So I have stepped forward when I experience something. I do share that no matter how it's received, because I think that planting seeds to people who might not really believe in it or understand, kind of opens the door to gift them the possibility that there's something more than this physical existence that we're in right now. So I do freely share now, where before, I was hesitant in my 20s and 30s.
Okay. Let's talk about your podcast for a bit. What are some of the topics that you cover?
Raise the Vibe with Liz is a podcast dedicated to interviewing healers, psychics, mediums, inspirational speakers, personal development coaches. I've had the pleasure of interviewing everyone from Ainsley McLeod, like I mentioned, to Guy Finley, who does spiritual work down in Oregon. Neil Donald Walsh was a guest on my show. Several mediums have been on my show. I really do feel blessed to be able to do this work. I loved in my 30s and 40s listening to podcasts, listening to video casts of these speakers. So to be able to have a show of my own and be able to continue to learn all of this great information and have the pleasure to be the interviewer myself and ask those questions that I always wanted to ask when I was listening before to someone else's.
What do you suppose, with the sum of your experience, near death experience, energy healing, afterlife communication, what are some of the biggest takeaways?
The biggest takeaways are life continues, that it's just not this physical experience. There is more. We are energetic beings, that time is not linear, that we can go as easily into the past and the future as we are in the present. I believe that having this experience, being a seer when my mom died in a couple of years ago, um, it shifts beliefs, even has taught me more fully that life does continue on. It's one thing, to have small experiences, but it's another to have someone that you're so close to die and be able to communicate with them on the other side, to be able to take that physical relationship and transform it into a spiritual relationship, spirit to spirit communication instead of physical to physical communication. And not only for myself, but I've also had people around me open up to the possibility that life does continue after death, because they too are having experiences. It's an opportunity for healing and for opening.
We do not die. And I've heard that many, many, many times. Last question. You titled your podcast Raising the Vibe with Liz. Raising the Vibe, does that have anything to do with ascension? such as moving from 3D to 5D, that type of thing?
I love raising the vibe. So for my podcast, Raise the Vibe with Liz, that started off as a radio show here on Vashon Island called Raise the Vibe, and you can still hear my replays online. It has been with me since my 20s when we talk about raising our vibration, when we meditate, when we stop eating meat, when we do yoga, when we're out in nature, when we're with spiritual teachers. If a person's in church, it opens you up. It raises your vibe, which means raises your frequency. So, and raising the frequency is how we're able to communicate with spirit on the other side. In this 3D dimension, we're very much in this physical realm, this density that keeps our vibe or our frequency kind of on the lower end. So, doing those things to raise our vibe, to raise our frequency up, like when I do mediumship, I'm raising my frequency up. Spirit is lowering their frequency so we can meet and communicate together. So, yes, raise the vibe is raising our vibe, raising our frequency, becoming more open minded, seeing that there's more to this life than the physical reality, seeing that there's ascension possibilities, that there's awakening that can happen.
That can't happen soon enough. It's great stuff. Liz, thanks so much for joining us today. How can our listeners find you online?
You can find me online at raisethevibewithliz.com and at Raise the Vibe on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Excellent. I will put that into the show notes and the transcript as well. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. You can also find more information on closertovenus.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.